Great. Thank you, Kate.
I was looking through the chat as we were doing the introduction, and I noticed, a couple of people saying that they were excited because this is a difficult database to use. But then on the flip side of that, I saw someone else saying that they found some really great information in the alien registration files. And that I feel like really sums up Fold3. You can find gold, but it can be sometimes difficult to use. Now, while I am not a military expert, so to speak, I am a super user. I love to basically look at databases like Fold3 and break them and figure out how do they work, right? That's because I want to make sure your research is successful. So let's jump on in. So for tonight's program, we have kind of a game plan here. 2 questions and a goal, right? So first is, what is Fold3 and what can I expect to find? And what important record collection should I look for each war or military conflict? But the main goal I want you guys to try, hopefully feel like you've satisfied by the end of this program, is to gain a better understanding of the less intuitive aspects of Fold3. So what is Fold3? Fold3 is home to this number. So well over 500 million total records. The database is considered the go-to resource for military records, but they have more than just military records. You can find things relating to Native American research. You can find UFO files, investigations. So it's an interesting collection of materials, but because it's so big, you can kind of get lost in it. One thing I want to point out is that there is a free Fold3 and there is a paid Fold3. Free means you do not need a subscription at all. Paid means that you do, unless you go to a library like the Genealogy Center. I looked to see if I could find a difference between the library edition of Fold3 and the paid version. I could not find a difference between the 2 versions. So if you are able to come into a library that has a subscription of Fold3, which many do if they already subscribe to Ancestry, which I want to point out that Fold3 is owned by Ancestry, right? So it is a facet of their company now. So let's talk about some of the free things that you don't need a subscription to, right? So a lot of these things you can get access to through Ancestry if you already subscribe there. But Social Security Death Index, VA Burial Stuff File, Pennsylvania Archives, News Gazette Virginian, War of 1812 pension files. I have an asterisk here because it is not complete, which we'll talk a little bit about later on. And all this other stuff. My favorite is really the Project Blue Book, the UFO investigations. I just feel like it's so random and it's not a small amount of records. It's like a decent size amount of records. I just find absolutely fascinating. The American Battleground Monuments Commission, I would actually recommend you go to their website instead of trying to search in Fold3 for it. You actually get more information from their website. You can see what medals somebody earned. It's just more detailed. But you can also search in a version of that on Fold3. And then the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, again, that is also free. It's very useful it's a useful way of searching through that. So what I want to do first is talk a little bit about navigation, right? There are a lot of buttons on their homepage. A lot of buttons. So first being this search bar. When you are just getting started, I do not recommend using this on their homepage. Don't do it, because what will happen is you will search the entire database. That is too much. It's just too much. What you need to do, the sweet spot for Fold3 is to narrow down to what you're looking for based on a couple different things. So down here, you have 2 options of doing that. First being, you have these, what they call title collections down here. So these are going to be mostly military conflicts You'll have a couple of other things in here that are not, like Black history, for example, or Native American. That is going to be in here. And you have some different ones for different countries. So we got Australia and Canada, New Zealand, UK. I've actually found some interesting World War One stuff for in the UK section for one of my ancestors who was living in England and fought in World War One for the British. So you have this. Now you can also browse this way. I'm going to first show you the simplest way of browsing if you don't know exactly what you're looking for. So let's start with the Revolutionary War. So the reason why I want to start with this is, one, it's the first one. Also, it is about 95% complete as far as like records go. So Fold3 has this partnership with the National Archives, so with NARA, and their partnership is to hopefully one day digitize all that NARA has relating to the military. But just be aware that dream has certainly not been fulfilled as of this date. You'll for sure find things on Fold3 from NARA that were previously microfilmed because that was the easiest thing for them to start with. So we're going to start with the Revolutionary War, and I want to take this opportunity to mention we're not going to go through all of these because we would be here for days. We're going to go through a number of them, but I want to take this moment to kind of highlight some very specific quirks for working with some of these collections. So let's take a look at the Revolutionary War. So that's what this page looks like. Now, what you can do is you can search through all of the Revolutionary War publications, which publications, think record sets, right? So when you think, I want to look for pensions, I want to look for service records, those are two different things, but they're calling them publications. So you can search through all of them. Now, I don't entirely recommend it, even by narrowing this down to the military conflict. I don't recommend just searching through all of them, namely because there's some problems with the search algorithm. Well, one, it doesn't do name variations very well. Middle initials are a problem. You'll have to search in a couple different ways. So I personally enjoy browsing collections, which I'll show you how to do that in a way that hopefully is feasible. Another thing I want to point out is this button. So what this page is, think of this like a splash page, right? So we have some featured publications here. We got a description, the introduction to a description, and then we have the source information down at the bottom. So you can look at the full description here, or you can just click this button. I highly recommend that you do that, especially when you're looking at specific publications or specific record sets, just because the titles of those are not always what they seem, and you oftentimes might have to read through this description to get an idea of what you're actually looking at. And then we have the publications themselves. And at the bottom here, it'll say how many are in Fold3 for the Revolutionary War, which, I mean, they have over 2 million records, so it's a large collection, 23 million, excuse me. And then over here on the right, you'll see related collections. This can be pretty helpful for if you find one thing that you like, you want to see what's similar. So if you click on the publications page or that tab, you can search publication name, description, ID. But if you just know, I want to find service records, you could just literally type service records because it's like a keyword search and it'll narrow it down for you so you can see what they have. So I just, as an example, wanted to show you the Revolutionary War service records. There are a couple of important things to point out on this page. First being, the first couple things you want to look at when you come to a page like this is first this, so how many records, is it complete? Because there are record publications or record sets that are not complete. You want to read the description. And then, like I said, I like to browse these collections, well, these publications, I should say. So to show you an example, I clicked browse up here. I went down to Virginia. You just can't see it because it's at the bottom. The person I'm looking for, I knew was in the 2nd Regiment. And then this tab opens saying individual or regiment. So under record type, you're going to want this unless you want a regimental history or documents relating to the regiment, which I highly recommend looking at. They're really interesting and they can give you some more insight into what was going on with that regiment. So by clicking individual, you get this thing that comes up. So surname starts with, and the person I was looking for was Levi Phillips. So I went down to P and then went to Levi. Here he is. Once you click on his name, you get the thumbnails and you can go from here. There's about 30-ish pages within this. So what is this? Before I show you what was actually in that, I do want to point out that once you become more familiar with those record sets and you know this is complete, this is not complete, you don't have to go through that first section where you go to Revolutionary War and then you filter it down from there. You could click the browse button, which this is kind of the path that I took here. And then you filter publications by conflict war. You select what you want, so Revolutionary War records. Select the state, which Virginia, way down at the bottom. Regiment, individual. So it's the same thing, but it's just on a different page. It just looks different. So if you're someone who maybe wants to look through them and be able to read descriptions pretty easily of what they are, because otherwise you can just click on the info button and do that. But if you want to just an easier way of digesting the information, start off doing the way that I first showed you. So what is in these records? These 3 pages are just examples. So you have these card numbers. The card numbers, they're not super important. They're not massively important. These are basically abstract cards to records. So you'll have an abstract card and then a record, an abstract card, then a record. One thing you should know is that they are not going to be in order on Fold3. They're just not. They're like not in any way chronologically in order. And it's because they uploaded them in the order that they were filmed. So it's essentially like, think of it like a packet, right? So they just it's just all thrown in there together. So what you'll want to do is download them all and then put them in chronological order, unless you would prefer to have it just kind of disorganized. So that's what this is. This is just Levi Phillips' statement of service slip. This is just the first page. It was actually several pages and it described his military service. But you'll also see things in like this, which is a letter that was sent from the War Office to somebody who was asking about veterans, well, Revolutionary War patriots specifically, that they thought they were related to. You'll see a lot of this type of thing in pension application records. Interestingly enough, for Levi in his pension application, there's like 6 letters of people who had written to the government saying, hey, I'm looking for military service records. And a lot of the people were doing DAR applications, and they range in years from like 1915 through the 30s. They're really interesting, namely because the people writing the letters, so you'll have a copy of the letter being sent to the government, and then you'll have a copy of the letter being sent back. The letters that are incoming, you'll have these people sharing all kinds of like tidbits of family history that they know to help the person looking for the records find the records they need. That's not something you might not find ordinarily. So it can be kind of juicy stuff. So moving on to the War of 1812, couple things about that. The pensions, they're only 82% complete. And that's why I said it's really important when you're looking at those publication pages where it shows the percentage of records complete. You need to take a look at that. Namely because the surnames, so when you go to filter it down by the surname, they only have A through S. When they will upload the rest of them, I could not tell you. I have no idea. I don't even know if they know. But that's something to kind of keep in mind when you're looking at War of 1812 records. Now, the compiled military service records of the entire service records, so the entire compiled service record, they only have Mississippi, Lake Erie, relating to the Lake Erie station, the Creek Indians, and Chickasaw. That is all they have that's been uploaded to Fold3. However, there is both a pension index and a service record index that is 100% complete. So if you find something in those indexes that you think is your people, make a note of it and come back to it maybe when it's uploaded, but you would probably have better luck contacting NARA directly and just waiting however long it takes to get a NARA request fulfilled, which lately it's a long time. But it gives you things to go look for. The Mexican-American War, we're going to talk about this for a little while because it's complicated. There is a rather complicated pension index situation, which we'll get into because there is a workaround with the pension numerical index. And there are also compiled service records, but not for every state. They have it for Arkansas, Mississippi, the Mormon Battalion, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, and Texas. So we're going to use this one as an example of how to do this workaround that I was talking about. This is one of those less intuitive things I mentioned about Fold3 earlier. Just wait. The pension numerical index. This is going to be a huge, huge collection. It is not organized by name. It is organized by number. You can search in it, search for names. This is one of those few times where I will suggest that you do so. But to show you the person we're going to talk about, his pension, I just wanted to show you what it looks like if you try to browse. So we're going to talk about Thomas R. Jones. So when you find the one that you need, say it's by searching, say it's by browsing, this is the page. This is what it looks like. On this side, you have index information, right? There's going to be source information further down, says what conflict, Mexican-American War, says this branch. Dependent pension application, WO. WO means widow's original, right? So this is not him applying for a pension, his dependent. So, and that's what this column is. So you have Mexican-American War. I'm going to show a bigger version of this in a minute so you can see this up close. But that's essentially what this page looks like. Here's that slightly more legible version. Here we have Thomas R. Jones. This is the application number. This down here is the certificate number. So you're going to have two different numbers to work with. You can look for this number and then find it when he is getting the certificate. So here he is down here. Now, the reason why I included this guy, David R. Jones, in this box was because they might be relatives. When you see things like this, especially where you're seeing multiple veterans for the same war, it doesn't hurt to like kind of casually glance around the page. Are there other people on this page that look familiar? Are there names that are similar, surnames specifically? because they might be relatives. This is where things get interesting. So the Mexican War Pension Index, there's another version of this on Family Search. It is not the same, which I'll get into that with you in a second. So I did find Thomas R. Jones. This gives some more information. So pension date, pension place, what his regiment is, who his company was, right? And the pensioner's name. So this is his widow's name, Mary A. Jones. This was not on the other one. So this one gives us a little bit more information. Now, the reason why I am about to tell you, you should search in both is because I'm not sure how complete the one on Family Search is. Family Search doesn't exactly say, oh, this is like a certain percentage of the entire collection. We have so many of them done. It doesn't say, so I can't justifiably say, oh yeah, they're all there. But also no two indexes are made the same. So you want to look at as many of them as possible to get little nuggets of information out of each of them, right? And we know this is the same person because it's the same application and certificate numbers. So with that information in mind, here's that up just slightly bigger. Why are they different, right? This is where reading the source information can be kind of helpful for you if you feel like you're being driven insane because you don't understand why these things appear to be the same, but they're not. This is a different NARA microfilm publication than the one that's on Fold3. That's why they look different. So again, it doesn't hurt to just look in both because you never know what you might find. I decided to, for funsies, look up Thomas R. Jones just in total Mexican-American War. So this is when I'm making the search a little bit more broad. Now that I know a little bit more information about him, I can see that this is probably him because this is the same unit that was mentioned in those index cards. So this is a bounty land warrant application index. Gives a service year, great. When you go to the page, see that he was rejected. Well, not rejected, I should say. One thing I want to point out about something like this is a breadcrumb to go look for other things. And that's one of the things that Fold3 can be good for, especially when you start to get into things that aren't complete, but you do have indexes, because it lets you know I should be looking for something. This little box, you'll see this at the top of a lot of records that are just index pages like this. So you have the info, people can comment, you can browse the whole thing, but the memorials page can be kind of interesting. And I recommend occasionally checking those memorials out. This is what they look like. Sometimes they can be really done up. Someone has added a ton of stuff to them, and they can be really cool, and they can have a lot of source information up here. They can even have pictures in the gallery. This one just happens to not. I do find it interesting that this is kind of new. Possible records from archives.com, possible records from newspapers.com. Now, I clicked review for this one. Well, and I checked out this one. Most of this is not relevant remotely, and I don't think it's referring to this guy. But it is interesting that they're trying to pull all this stuff together. And this algorithm, because this is a computer algorithm thing, this might get better with time. So maybe something to keep an eye out for. So let's talk about the Civil War. So there are some widows' pensions. There is a Civil War pension index that is not the same as the one on Ancestry, which we'll get into a little bit. There's going to be Union service records, Confederate service records, and then Southern claims. So let's talk about the widows' pensions. So they are going to be filed under the soldier's name, as this mentions. So let's see what we can find. And the reason why I say there is some is take a look at that number, only 21%. So if you're not finding your ancestor in here, don't assume that they don't have a pension, because they might. It just might not be available online. As an example, I clicked browse, and then I went to Louisiana infantry, and I was looking to see if they had the 18th regiment specifically, because that is a regiment that someone who I believe might be one of my ancestors was in. So they don't have it. Will they ever have it? I don't know, but I will probably continue to check back here to see if it gets added at some point. Now, the Civil War Pensions Index. This is a lot of fun, namely because it is not just the Civil War. It is for the U.S. Army between 1861 and 1900. So it will include the Spanish-American War veterans and the Philippine insurrection veterans. They're all going to be in here. This title, this publication, is not clear. It doesn't actually say that it includes all of that. If I was looking for a Spanish-American War pension in the index, well, there isn't a Spanish-American War pension index. I wouldn't have thought, oh, check Civil War. Right? So this is some of those quirky little things, these little nuances that you might need to know to effectively use Fold3. So just as an example, I had previously, so when I clicked browse, I had selected Louisiana. It's just not in this column. I can only screenshot so much at a time. You pick Army of Service, infantry, pick a regiment. So I'm like, oh, 18th. Okay. Company C. Okay, we're doing good. Didn't find the person I was looking for, but we're going to take a look at this guy, Hannibal Lee. So on here, you have his name. It should say late rank, but it's blank. Company, regiment, all that good stuff. And then we have these certificate and application numbers, right? So I want to point out invalid. It's not invalid, like something is invalid. Invalid, what this means is if a veteran survived the war, he applied for a pension based on what was allowable by law at the time of his application. So that might be that he lost an arm or an eye or a foot during the war. So some type of disability or disability caused from disease that occurred while he was in service. Those laws are going to change a little bit, but that's what this means. The laws will change and become more flexible, and eventually they were allowing veterans who had lived long enough to simply receive a pension because they're elderly. But then you also have the widow's pensions, which are great because they can have just a lot of information in them. So I just wanted to explain what this means, because a lot of people are kind of hazy on what that means. Now, this is the version that's on Ancestry. So as I said, there are two of these indexes, the one on Fold3, the one on Ancestry. This one is a little bit more detailed because it includes the name of his widow. Now, the reason why I would suggest that you look at both is because if you go back, not on this one, this example, but down here in the remarks, you might see something called a C or an XC file number. That is what it would be filed under. Now, it's a little complicated, so bear with me. So longer lived veterans later had their files renumbered from these to this like C or XC file number. So whatever the last number it is, that is where you're going to find it. So if you're trying to make a request with NARA, you're going to want the most recent certificate numbers. So that is not necessarily going to appear on this one, but then again, it might. So you might want to check both just to be sure. Here we have Catherine Lee. So for the US Civil War, this was similar to when we at the beginning of the program went to the general Revolutionary War page. So they're going to have 47 million records. Related collections, it's going to be broken down by Confederacy and the Union, which here we go. We have a nice purple box. I wanted to show some specific examples. Civil War Service Records Union. Now, here's the thing. You're going to have people, you're going to have states. If you were to go to the Union section of the Civil War collection, you're going to see states that are Southern. You're going to see states that are Northern as well, obviously. If you go to the Confederacy section, you're going to see states that did not secede from the Union. So you might want to check both just to be sure. So, for example, we have this one just for Louisiana. I see that it's complete. So we click the first New Orleans Infantry, just so you can see what that looks like. Now, surname starts with, obviously, when you want to find an actual person, you would click these and keep going. But I wanted to point this out specifically because the unit information is really interesting. It has a lot of stuff. So you can learn about what the unit was doing, right? And if you have an ancestor that maybe disappears, maybe this could solve that problem for you. So it was really, really long. It's a lot of pages. So obviously I couldn't include all of them, but you're going to have an index to names that are mentioned in the regimental papers. And then you also have record of events. So a lot of really juicy stuff kind of buried in there. And people wouldn't ordinarily think to look at the unit information when they see this. They want to get to their people. Well, take a minute to look at this, and also take a minute to look at the introduction too. The introduction is what is basically the front matter of the microfilm, and it gives a description of the record set. So when I decided to find a person, I found this guy, Joseph Smith. Here we have his card numbers. Here we have his muster and descriptive role abstract. So a lot of juicy information, his age, his occupation, where he was living, all kinds of good stuff. Did he have a bounty? Where did he muster in? When? Another thing I want to point out is when you see CSA next to something, but it says Union, this is what that means. These are former Confederate soldiers. So they're called galvanized Yankees, who served in the 1st through the 6th U.S. Volunteer Infantry Regiment. So they went out west to go fight Native Americans. That's what this is. But then CSA, just regular old Confederate States of America. So this actually is referring to the government. The Confederate records for the Civil War on Fold3, they're actually pretty complete because the War Office just had them. You'll also see things like the Union and Citizens file and the Confederate Citizens file. These can be really, really fascinating. They're broken down by either business or individual. So for this is people looking for, the government, military police, I should say, they're looking for deserters, spies, disloyal citizens, all that fun stuff. And in this side, this more had to do with money, from what I've been seeing, at least. Definitely things to look at. You can find some, again, really just interesting information. Things that you wouldn't think would be interesting that are. Another thing I'd recommend looking at if you're doing Civil War research are the Southern Claims Commission approved and barred and disallowed claims. So that's essentially approved means that the US government was going to address, like give the person compensation for supplies, livestock, and other things taken by the Union during the Civil War. Barred, so like outright barred, that is going to be, they didn't even consider the application because the government could prove that this person had a connection to the Confederacy. Therefore, the applicant isn't eligible because they are not considered loyal. These are meant for loyal Unionists to be recompensed for how they and their property were treated by the Union Army. And disallowed basically just means that they didn't have enough evidence to prove it or not prove it. That's what that is. So you can search through either of these. It gives you an idea of what's going on in a community, especially you'll have affidavits in these of neighbors attesting to things that are happening. You'll see that type of stuff also in pension applications as well. People signing affidavits stating, oh, I know that this person was in the military in these dates. So the affidavits can hold a lot of really useful information that you definitely want to dig into. Another thing I want to point out, the U.S. Veterans Administration pension payment cards. So not entirely complete, but very complete. So the Bureau of Pension and Veterans Administration, they started using this card system around 1907 to keep track of paying the pensions. So they are making sure that everyone is getting paid appropriately. So this is an interesting thing to look at. I am a big fan of follow the money. You can figure out what's going on with the person, where they're moving to, especially when you're maybe not finding other records. Money talks, right? So to show you guys an example, here's one of those cards for a man named Samuel P. Hodges. He's not related to me, but I needed to find some good examples. We have a certificate number in his service listed up here. In the remarks, it just says ending June 22nd, 1907, which was his date of death, which is super helpful. And it says that they need to start paying his wife, Nancy J. Hodges, his widow. And also, this Money Fork, Arkansas, I'm assuming this is where they were living at the time. So you'll have one for him, right? And then you'll have another card for her. So those are going to be together on Fold3. Just turn to the next page, either forward or backwards, and you should find it. On hers, you have all this additional information. So when did it start, the date of the certificate. There's a lot of dates involved. Minors $2 per month additional. So we do have another name of a child. And it looks like in the remarks, so we have a W for widow. Money Fork, Arkansas is scratched out. Stratford, Oklahoma, so they must have moved. Issued in lieu of lost certificate dated in the state. So I guess they lost the certificate at some point. Now, those cards tell you that you need to go look for a ledger. So that's kind of, again, as I said earlier, a good thing about Fold3 is that if you do find something, it tells you that you should be looking for something else. So this is a payment ledger. This is not on Fold3. I included in the handout a page in Family Search's research wiki that has links to where you can find this, but this is on Internet Archive, which, I mean, this isn't searchable, but I was able to find it because I found the other stuff. So we have Samuel P. Hodges, his rate of pay. We have some additional codes here. We have a certificate number. And you'll have the year, quarter, day, the amount. So paid widow. We know that he's going to Chicago to get this money. So again, this is just adding more to the story. So Spanish-American War, we do have the Service Records Index. There is not a pension index, as I said earlier, so you will need to look in the Civil War Pension Index. Now, when you find one in the pension index, it will probably say war with Spain. The Philippine insurrection veterans, theirs will also say war with Spain. So that's something to maybe keep an eye out for. World War I. Okay, so as I said at the beginning of the program, we're not going to have time to go through all of these, but I do want to just kind of bring up the civilian draft registration cards are not the same thing as just the regular old draft registration cards. They're not super easy to use. Don't recommend bothering with them because it's the same information. It's just a different format of how they're arranged. But in Fold3, these, the U.S. Army World War I Transport Service and Passenger List, these are gold. What you'll want to do is you'll want to find an outgoing passenger list of when they're leaving and one coming in. If you can't find one and you think that they might have died over there, that's something that you want to start looking for. So start looking for the American battlegrounds monuments and other World War I casualty lists. So, as I said earlier, so the World War I Transport Service passenger list, there are only two types, incoming and outgoing. World War II, I know we're flying through this at this point, but I want to make sure we have enough time for questions. The missing aircrew reports are really important if you need to find someone who maybe crashed or went missing and they were in the Air Force during World War II. These are really great. I highly recommend looking through unit histories. There are dozens of unit histories in Fold3. I mean, it's so many, it's unbelievable. And the unit histories, they offer a lot of really juicy details about what people are doing, right? Even if you're not finding your direct ancestor, if you know that they're in that unit, that's giving you part of their story. And I just enjoy the US Air Force photos, which I'll show you some in a minute. And then we have the Army and Army Air Force casualty reports. And this is an example of one of those. A section of a page for St. James Parish in Louisiana. So we got their names, their service numbers, their rank and rating, and also their status. So killed in action, that type of thing. So unit histories, this is an example of one of those. So the Air Force photos, I wanted to point this out specifically because there's something kind of interesting that I noticed about it. So when you click browse and then you go to place, I picked the Philippines, this is where my grandfather was. I wanted to look at personnel because I wanted to look at people. And I want to look at groups, not necessarily individuals. So when I did that, you see this, caption not entered or none entered. So you're thinking, okay, these are pictures that don't have captions. If you click on that first picture, look there, there is a caption. So if you're not finding pictures and you're expecting to find pictures, try just browsing through some of this stuff because things that they say don't have captions probably do, or they might at least. There are other collections that are not military related that I think are really important. So the Black History records, it's a lot of what you're going to find. You're going to find anti-slavery manuscripts collection, Board of Commissioners, Emancipation of Slaves in D.C., Civil War Union Colored Troop Service records. Those are complete. Court slave records for D.C., so many things. So you want to look through that title collection. And then there's also a Native American collection. So we have the Dawes enrollment cards, the Dawes packets, the Eastern Cherokee applications, the Miller Roll, the Indian census rolls, and then the Michigan and Illinois Indian Wars service records. This is just a handful. I mean, there's certainly more you can look at, but these are the big ones, especially the Dawes enrollment cards, the Dawes packets, and the Indian census rolls. Just to do a recap, I've talked about a lot so far. There's no way we can go through all of them. I apologize for those of you who might be holding out for me talking about the Korean War or talking about Vietnam. We just can't get to everything. But I will say that the amount of things you can like find in Fold 3, it starts to kind of taper off around World War II, unless you start digging into Navy cruise books or Navy support books or things like that. But records and starts to taper down, and that's namely because of privacy. They just haven't been released. So, some search tips. Recap: don't search the entire database. Read the publication descriptions. You want to do that. Look for your people in the records of other people. Those affidavits that you'll see in certain types of records, like Southern claims and in pension applications, you want to see if you can find them in somebody else's records if you can't find them in their own, right? So be open to searching through all of it. And don't limit yourself to Fold 3. No two indexes are made the same. No two record collection types remain the same. No two search algorithms are made the same. You want to try to look as many places as you can, but don't limit yourself to Fold 3. There are things you can only find on Fold 3. That is true. But the most important thing is remember to just be patient with yourself when using Fold 3, because it is a difficult database to work with. You can get frustrated. I understand that. I get frustrated with it too. Just know it's not necessarily you. It just involves maybe finding a strange workaround to find the information you need. So just be patient, and when in doubt, send us an email. Have our email address here. We're always happy to try to help you find the records you need.